Hey scholars, today we are going to be looking at chapter 1 of well-ordered language. So I would like you to be reading along with me in this, and we're going to be underlining some important things. So if you do not have your well-ordered language workbook with you, pause the video, go grab it, come back, and continue watching. All right. Let's open up to chapter 1, and let's go ahead and we're just going to read through a little bit, and then we'll get to do a little bit more after that. 4 kinds of sentences and principal elements. If the pilots at an air show all flew their jets in whatever direction they wanted, without a plan, and without talking to each other, you might witness a terrible mid-air collision. Instead, the pilots fly in a carefully organized formation, thrilling the crowd with their daring, well-ordered acrobatics. Similarly, if authors linked words randomly, you might open a book and find word collisions like this. Crowd, the low plane show, the at cheering over swooped jet the air. That's just nonsense, a jumble of language. The syntax, or word order, let's take a moment, and in your book, I want you to underline that. The syntax, or word order. It's giving us a definition. So the syntax or word order is all wrong. However, if you organize the same words logically, paying attention to the 8 parts of speech and the functions, you get something much less mixed up. At the air show, the jet plane swooped low over the cheering crowd. Words put together logically make up sentences, and each sentence expresses a complete thought. Words are not random when placed in order within a sentence. They are ideas that have meaning. To communicate well, we need to form sentences correctly. When we study sentences, we see that there are only 4 kinds, and that each one, no matter what kind, has 2 principal elements. Part 1 of this chapter explores the 4 kinds of sentences: declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. Part 2 explains how to analyze the double structure of each sentence, subject and predicate. These principles about sentence types and structures may be review for you if, for instance, you have already studied well-ordered language level 1. It is important to review these principles because they are like the foundations of a house. Builders always lay house foundation before they work on the floors and walls because the foundation is what supports the whole house. So, in the same way, we must lay the foundation for well-ordered language too. Here, in Chapter 1, in addition to the review, this chapter will also introduce an important new tool for understanding grammar: the sentence diagram. All right, so let's look at Part 1 of kinds of sentences. Alfred Lord Tennyson uses all 4 kinds of sentences in the last stanza of his poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade. This poem is about a real tragedy that happened in the 1850s during the Crimean War. A small group of British cavalry, or soldiers on horseback, charged into the midst of their enemy, and they were fired on from 3 sides by soldiers with muskets and small cannons. The outnumbered riders were extremely brave, but sadly, many of them died. Tennyson wanted everyone to remember their courage and loyalty. That is a lot of meaning and emotion to pack into a small space, and Tennyson accomplished it by using all 4 kinds of sentences. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the light brigade. Noble 600. You might remember that the declarative sentence declares something. A declarative sentence states or declares that something is fact. Let's go ahead and underline that in our book. A declarative sentence states or declares that something is a fact. In his poem, Tennyson makes known that people from all over the globe noticed this battle. All the world wondered. A declarative sentence ends with a period. Let's underline that as well. A declarative sentence ends with a period. You can define an interrogative sentence, or let me rephrase that. Can you define an interrogative sentence? It is a question. Tennyson asks the question, when can their glory fade? He isn't really expecting the reader to answer, but he is asking the reader to think about the writers and their sacrifice as to how long-lasting significance. You can easily spot an interrogative sentence because it ends with a question mark. So let's underline an interrogative sentence. It is a question. It ends with a question mark. Think about the third kind of sentence. An imperative sentence expresses a command or a request. To help you remember what imperative means, think of an emperor giving commands. The word emperor has the same Latin root as imperative. Imperative sentences assume that a person is being addressed, namely you. We call this an implied subject. The subject is you, even though the word does not appear in the sentence. Tennyson calls to the reader to take notice when he writes, honor the charge they made. He is really saying, you honor the charge they made. An imperative sentence often ends with an exclamation point, but sometimes with a period. An imperative sentence expresses a command or request. An imperative sentence often ends with an exclamation point, but sometimes with a period. An exclamatory sentence is one that expresses strong feelings or emotions. This kind of sentence uses words and punctuation that communicate the strength of the author's exclamation. Tennyson wants you to feel the power behind the message. Oh, the wild charge they made. After he was speaking to you, he would say this sentence with a heavy sigh, expressing great admiration. He is amazed at how these men pushed forward into battle, even against all odds. Exclamatory sentences end with an exclamation point. Keep in mind that it might be easy to confuse an exclamatory sentence with an imperative sentence, since they both can end with an exclamation point. Remember, exclamatory sentences express strong feelings, and imperative sentences give a command. So an exclamatory sentence is one that expresses strong feelings or emotions. Exclamatory sentences end with an exclamation point. And then let's underline, remember, exclamatory sentences express strong feelings and imperative sentences give a command. So all sentences begin with a capital letter and end with an end mark. A declarative sentence ends with a period. An interrogative sentence ends with a question mark. An imperative sentence sometimes ends with a period and sometimes with an exclamation point. An exclamatory sentence ends with an exclamation point. Some terms to remember. When learning about something new, it is important to understand the words that describe it. Think about a model airplane with all its pieces: the propeller, wings, fuselage, which is the body, and landing gear. It's much easier to assemble it when you know the names of its parts. What those parts do and how those parts function together. This same idea applies to grammar. By learning definitions for grammar terms, you will gain a better understanding of how grammar works. Be sure to memorize the definitions in each lesson. So we have some songs, the 8 parts of speech and sentence. Those songs will be posted on Google Classroom. Practice singing along with those. We'll be using those throughout the year. Sentences to analyze. To analyze is to take something apart or unloose its parts to understand it better. For example, the fully assembled model airplane, which is pictured on the outside of the box, will only be completed if you can lay out all the pieces and figure out what their purposes are. In this chapter, we will begin to analyze sentences by identifying the kinds of sentences. You may already be familiar with this first step for taking sentences apart in order to understand them, but this will be good review for you. Later, we will be identifying all the parts of speech and parts of a sentence, including elements not included in Well-Ordered Language Level 1. Each chapter will introduce another part of the analysis, building on what we already know. But every sentence analysis begins with identification of its sentence type. The following examples show how to analyze the 4 kinds of sentences. You read the sentence, you identify it as a sentence, you identify what kind of sentence it is. Note that all of these statements in gray are to be said aloud and memorized. So, as I read the gray part, read it with me. Declarative sentence. The 600 men rode boldly. First, read the sentence aloud. The 600 men rode boldly. This is a sentence because it is a group of words that express a complete thought. It is a declarative sentence because it makes a statement. Interrogative sentence. Where did the 600 men ride? First, read the sentence aloud. Where did the 600 men ride? This is a sentence because it is a group of words that express a complete thought. It is an interrogative sentence because it is a question. Imperative sentence. Ride your horse into the battle. This is a sentence because it is a group of words that express a complete thought. It is an imperative sentence because it gives a command. Exclamatory sentence. Ah, they rode right into the valley of death. This is a sentence because it is a group of words that expresses a complete thought. It is an exclamatory sentence because it expresses strong feeling. So after that, you should really know what a sentence is. It is a group of words that express a complete thought. Okay. So this is what you all are going to be working on, is your lesson A, and you're going to go through each question and answer them as best you can. So, question number 1, what kind of sentence is each of the following sentences? Circle the correct answer. DEC for declarative sentence, INT for interrogative sentence, IMP for imperative sentence, or EX for an exclamatory sentence. Now, this is an example. The boys were playing in the backyard. This is a declarative sentence because it states a fact. So they circled declarative. Your job for the rest of this is to read each sentence. Where did Calvin get that power squirt gun? And then I need to decide, is it declarative, interrogative, imperative, or exclamatory? If you're having a hard time remembering what each one does, you have more examples on this page. And we just went through and underlined the important parts about what each one is. So go back and look at those definitions. The definitions are also in the glossary. For question number 2, imagine playing outside in a hot, late summer day after school. Then write an example of each kind of sentence about it. So you're going to write a declarative sentence about backyard fun. For example, I could write, the water fight was backyard fun. So I'm going to include the word in there. I'm going to include backyard fun somewhere in my sentence. And it needs to be a declarative sentence. So it should be a statement of fact. Next one, write an interrogative sentence about a squirt gun. Could be, it needs to include the word squirt gun in it, and it needs to be an interrogative sentence. Next one, write an imperative sentence about water fights. Again, this needs to have water fights in it, and it needs to be an imperative sentence. And remember, with imperative sentence, it is a command. The subject is you, but the word you won't show up. An exclamatory sentence about garden hose. So I need to have the word garden hose, and it needs to be an exclamatory sentence. And lastly, for question number 3, you're going to analyze the following sentences. Then on the line, it's provided, write DEC for declarative, INT for interrogative sentence, IMP for imperative sentence, or exclamatory EX for exclamatory sentence. So you're going to look at this sentence, and then you're going to write out what type of sentence it is. It is very similar to this activity, but instead of circling, you are writing out which kind it is. You can write out the whole word, or you can write the shorthand. So DEC for declarative, INT for interrogative, IMP for imperative, EX for exclamatory. And you're going to do that for the full list. And that is all you have to accomplish in today's lesson. If you have questions, go ahead and make sure to ask your homeroom teacher during our Zoom classes. All right, bye.